Okay, hello and welcome. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com, and we are here for a new session in our Fall 2014 BI and Reporting event series. Today, I'm happy to welcome back a real BI and Dynamics NAV expert, Cristian Nicola. Cristi is a veteran NAV professional who you'll frequently see speaking, writing, presenting about Dynamics NAV, about Excel, Power BI, and BI and reporting solutions, and we are very happy to have him back today. I just wanted to add that we do invite you to add your feedback and ask questions today during Cristi's presentation. And I would also like to recognize our event series sponsors and thank them for their support. They are Bioanalytics, De facto, Solver, Target, and Zap. So as we get started, please know that you can use the Q&A block or the chat that you see on the right side of the webcast session to ask your questions, and we hope you do. And without further delay, please let me hand it off to Cristi. Are you there? Cristi, I'm going to take you off of mute. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Should I change slides?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. As Jason mentioned, my name is Cristian Nicola, and I'm with DynamicsBIGuide.com. We'll be talking about various options of financial reporting in Excel with Dynamics NAV. The goal for today is to cover some ways that are available both in 2009 as well as 2013 and up, I guess pre-roll teleclient as well as after roll teleclient, in extracting data from NAV, preferably into Excel, and therefore from there the expectation is that basically people would be able to sort of develop their own reports or make use of other tools available within the Excel family. The agenda for today will be we will discuss briefly about two options that are available pretty much in any version of Navision. I would expect most people that might be familiar, but I just figured I should mention them just in case I'm new to Navision: account schedules, analysis, views. After that, we will talk of the various options for exporting data to Excel from Navision 2013, 2013 R2, and 2015. Mainly, the best option is OData Web Services. And then the third topic will be reporting with Microsoft Power Pivot, which is available basically for any version running SQL. So generally 2009 and up, but normally even if you are lower than 2009, if it's 3.7, 4.0, 5.0, you can still run it as long as you're running a SQL. And then at the end, we'll open up for Q&A. Just as Jason mentioned, as we keep going, if you do have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A panel, and we will answer as fast as we can. Given the number of options that are available in the Navision, I don't think we can sort of get into all of them in detail. My goal for today is basically just to sort of showcase what is available, do a quick run through all of them, and sort of leave some breadcrumbs for you to go home and try to work your way from there. I am available for the questions. Hopefully, I will give you enough information to get started, and we can take it from there. As discussed, the first part, we will just go through account schedules and analysis views. I'll share my screen and just show you the options within Navision 2009. Okay, so obviously there were well-known options of exporting data in Navision, copy and pasting from a screen, or using a data port to generate a CSV file. Aside from those two, there are some structured methods to put data together from NAV, especially on the GL level. One of them, it's actually quite a powerful tool that a lot of people tend to overlook, at least at the beginning of the implementation of Navision, but they really should try to make the most out of it, and that is called account schedules. Account schedules is actually a financial report writer that allows you to define the lines and the columns within the financial report. So as you can see here, one of the standard ones that comes with Kronos the demo database, it comes out of the standard package. There's a list of them. For instance, there's a balance sheet one. There is one for income statement, and then there's a couple of other ones that I'm not going to go through right now. As you can see here, you can define various lines, and you can define then the names for them yourself. So you can basically decide the layout of the lines, and each line can represent either a total, the balance of an account from the vision, or it could represent a formula where you're adding lines together, or basically it could allow for formatting like underlining and double underlining, and then like here towards the end. In terms of setting up the columns, you can set up various column layouts. For instance, one of the ones that comes out of the package is period, and year to date with percentage of total revenue. So it allows you to basically control what the columns do. So for instance, you want to see your current period, and it will read basically from the budget, and then it will also read from the GL and allow to show the difference between the two. Year to date, it's an option to calculate, and it automatically calculates this. Again, I am not trying to basically give you a training on how this is used. It's simply to understand that there are options there in terms of the account schedules. For instance, you can define just a relatively simple one with basically say just the balance of the account. So this is balance a day for GL entries, and that's a relatively straightforward one. So this tool allows visualization of the results. Basically, you can go into Navision and just run the screen, go into overview, and then basically the system will showcase income, period to date and year to date, and percentage over revenue. So as you can see, this is for different periods. You can sort of scroll up here. As you can see, it's month, it's February 2011. I can scroll through the periods, March 2011, and so on. So you can apply department filters. You can apply different currency modifications. And then the important part here is you can also export this to Excel. So basically on the functions, you have a feature that exports to Excel. You can add either to an existing spreadsheet, but basically if you were to do this every month, probably you'd want to have one Excel spreadsheet that basically allows you would create different tabs, so you can actually create a new tab for each of them. So if I just create a workbook, it will take the data from the screen, it will put in all the lines that were defined within that particular account schedule setup, as well as the columns, and just bring them all to Excel. Again, the numbers here, as you can see, there are basically actual numbers. There's no link, there's no drill down ability. So from that perspective, it's relatively limited. But obviously allows you to take the details out in a formatted layout into Excel, and from there, perhaps manipulate it further if it needs to, if the format is not 100% to the needs of your reports. I would encourage you to talk to your partner and basically make sure they teach you more about this if you're not using it today. Okay. This is account schedules that basically can be used within Navision as well as exporting to Excel. The other feature, which is relatively similar, is analysis by dimension. So this is based on, and I will start from the setup, this is based on a concept called analysis views. So on the financial management setup and dimensions, there is a new setup called analysis views. So what you can do here is you can create various analysis views that basically take into consideration your general ledger. So when you create one, you can actually say, I only wanted to basically look at a specific set of accounts. You could also do all the accounts. Perhaps if you don't really care about the detail, you could actually choose to have the data compressed automatically, basically, so it could be by day, by week, by month, quarter, year, or period. Basically, I found if you set it up to none, you will get every single detail. Also, you can set up a starting date, so basically you don't have to have everything they have in the system. And the most important feature here is actually you can sort of create a summary. This analysis views can create summaries and allow you to filter by the various dimensions in the system. Normally, it's relatively simple to filter on the 2 global dimensions, but basically, if you want to go to more than 2, then it gets a little bit more complicated. This one allows you to define which are the dimensions specific to the analysis view, and dimension 1 and 2 do not have to be the global dimensions in the system. Generally, what happens is the system, as you can see, there's an update button here. It can be set up to be update on posting, which means automatically this is being updated, this sort of analysis view is being updated every time a posting happens, or otherwise you would have to go and update manually. Obviously, the easy way is to set up update on posting, which will basically do it every time someone posts something. That has to be used with a little bit of restraint, simply because that will add a little bit of an overhead every time a GL transaction, any kind of transaction in his GL will be posted to your system. So obviously, if you have a lot of these, it could introduce, performance issues or locking. So the other option is to actually update these things either manually, whenever at the end of the month, whenever you're trying to run some reports, or simply put it on the scheduler and just have them updated at night. So once these analysis views are set up, they can be used just for visualization the same way as the account schedules through this option here, analysis by dimensions. So here the screen is one of the familiar screens in at least 2009 Classic, basically the Trendscape. So the revenue, as you saw on the setup, it filters only on the revenue accounts. So these are all the accounts in there. You can change over here. I can see my data by day. I can see it by week. I can see it by month, by quarter, or by year. And then you can use this to basically scroll among the periods. So here you got the years. It starts in 2010 and goes on. So if we move back to the month, these are the values across the various months. And actually, you can change, as you can see here, you have the lines, but you can change the columns. It could be period, but it could also be one of the departments. So for instance, you can sort of break it out by each department, that means production, sales. You can change it by project, assuming there were any projects set up within the control here. So obviously there weren't. So if we go back to the period, this is probably the most common one that you will be using. There are, just like with the other one, filters. You can also filter by various departments here, so you can apply filters that way, and then you can apply some rounding and a couple of financial options here. The interesting part with this, in itself, I think it's a quite powerful tool within the Vision as it is, but also you can actually export this just like the account schedules. You can export it to Excel. So if you click Export to Excel, automatically create a spreadsheet. And it will try to mimic as much as possible the Trendscape layout that is in the Vision. As you can see, it starts from 1 month before, one period before the period that we had on the screen, and then it sort of generates all the columns where we do have data. It's not necessarily. I think it's not necessarily a bad layout, and you can, it puts it into a pivot table, so therefore you can try to do a little bit of slicing and dicing, but I do not expect that you would be using this too much. The interesting part, it creates a couple of other tabs. So one tab, at least this one, tells you which sort of filters the data came from. But the most important part of this is actually the raw data. So the pivot table is actually based on this third tab called Data. And the third tab actually gives you the records that are being created within a Vision when you set up an analysis view. So as you can see here, it gives you the GL account. It gives you the three dimensions that you've actually set up. So you have area, department, and project. And then it gives you some columns that are specific to the design of it. So it gives you the day of the transaction, the week of the transaction, the month, the quarter, and the year, as well as the start date of the accounting period. It gives you the amount, the debit amount, the credit amount, and if you had included the budgets, then you would have the budgeted amount here. So it's a little bit confusing here because of these levels. So basically, normally the last level on each of these things, on the GL, the last level will be the one that will include all the accounts. The reason for the levels here is simply to allow for the indenting of the chart of accounts that you normally have in place, and it kind of applies the same concept over here on the dimensions as well. So usually the last level is the level with the data. So what I would expect is most people, if you export this data, you could probably get rid of all the columns that you don't need. So we can get rid of this and you can get rid of that. So now all of a sudden we have the GL, we have our 3 dimensions that we wanted, the amount, the debit amount, credit amount, and possibly the budget amount if you needed that. And therefore now you have a data export out of the Vision that you can go and run some reports against. So that's, I think this is pretty much the most useful feature out of this, and given the filters they have and everything, it allows you some control in terms of the data being extracted and without having to write any kind of data ports or anything else against it just to get it. So again, I think it's something that should be explored, and hopefully you probably are using this already today. Okay, we'll go back to the slide for a second. Okay, so basically this was the very quick overview of account schedules analysis views, which is a feature available in all the versions of Navision. But I mean, I think there are some exciting features that are available with 2013 that we will get into right now. So the next option that we'll talk about is exporting data to Excel with OData web services.
Hey, Christy, there's a question that came in about the dimensions.
What happens when transactions are backdated at dimension? Yes, so the question is what happens when transactions are backdated as the analysis by dimension row data is updated. Yes, it is updated. Basically the way, I probably should have pointed that out on the analysis view setup screen. You'll see that there is something called the last entry number. Essentially, the system doesn't work by date when it keeps track of this analysis view transaction. It actually goes by the GL entry number. So basically, every time there's an update that needs to be done, it will look at the last entry number and then will process all the new GL entries from the last one. So it doesn't really matter, basically, if that was posted in today's date or if it was posted with 3 years ago, it will basically pick it up and show it in there. Obviously, you would have to go and re-export it. If you were using Excel, you would have to go re-export it to Excel again, but yes, it will be updated. Okay, so going back to 2013, the next thing that we'll talk about is OData Web Services. So OData Web Services, it's a sort of like web services, but it has a different layout behind the scenes. It's a new technology, it's a standard that Microsoft, it's an open standard that Microsoft came up with, but basically has tried to make it a generic standard, and there's a lot of other companies that are getting behind this. OData Web Services can be automatically generated out of any version out of Navision starting from 2013. So any version 2013, 2013 R2, and 2015 can generate these simply by using Navision. So they can be generated from queries and pages, which I guess if you are familiar with pages, it's a replacement of the forms in the Rolltail client, which I guess is the Windows client in 2013. And queries is a new object that is a new object type that is available in 2013 and up, and essentially kind of mimics the functionality of a SQL query, if you will. It was designed specifically for extraction of data, and while it's not quite popularly well known right now, it actually has a lot of uses, and I expect Microsoft to make more and more use of it as new versions come out. The advantage of using this in terms of getting data out to Excel is that you can define the data sets that you want to extract out of Navision once using the aforementioned queries and pages, and then you can use it everywhere. I mean, you can use it in a lot of places. You can use it in Excel. You can actually use it in SQL Server reporting services. Also, they can be used within the Navision as well to basically be displayed and to be used within reports. So it allows to define a reporting strategy on the same common basis for all the users in your organization. The other good thing about this is that basically the access to the data underlying pages and queries follows the NAV security setup. So basically, the user will have to, if the user is assigned access to the tables and the field to the tables that are being read by the page of the query, it will allow them. If they do not, they will not be able to, regardless of whether they can actually get to the object itself. Also, I will illustrate some options. You can export. You can do a raw data dump using OData Web Services. So basically, just get the entire general ledger or the budget. But also, you can sort of limit the subsets to control access, or simply to just make a easier reporting interface. So I think it's probably easier if I get into an actual example, and I will demonstrate how this is done. Okay. Okay, so this was 2009, which I will close right now. And if we go, this is 2013 for the 2013, the version that I'm running on one of the virtual machines on my computer. So this is 2013. So basically, as I was mentioning to you, the two ways to generate OData web services are pages, which is basically over here, and it's the equivalent of the forms in Classic Client, and then queries, which are a new object over here. So I will start with pages. I guess each of them has its own uses, and I'll try to illustrate them. So for instance, what we can do is we can create a new page just to export GL entries. So I will say that I want to get records from the GL entry table. Just put it into a list. That's all it needs. And then it's a pretty straightforward wizard that you can go through. So I want to get my entry number, my GL account number, my posting date, document type, document number, balancing account number maybe, amount, global dimension 1 and 2. I guess depending on how you want to run your reports, you could probably throw in there debit and credit amount, external document number, and obviously many other fields depending on the goals with this particular screen. Once you have selected all the fields that you need, all you got to do is just save this. So let's say we say 50,002. We call it MSDW GL. All right, there you go. Essentially, this is a page that displays data the same way as anything else in a vision. So if I were to just simply run this, this is basically a list that shows the GL entries. You probably have seen this kind of lists anyway. If you go to a chart of accounts and then you go to the detailed ledger entries of that particular account. So nothing really out of the ordinary. Also, I think this perhaps maybe suggests to you that there is also a way you can get started without even creating pages. So obviously you can use most of the or a lot of the pages that are available already into the application, and you can expose them as OData web services. So you can create some separately, or you can just reuse some of the ones that are already in the system where probably you already have the accounts that you would expect to use. Once a page is created, if we want to make it available as a web service, we just go to the web services screen. So I guess I'll start from here. You just have to add it to the web services list. So you just search for web services. Sorry for the typing. And this is the list here, and we just say we want to add to this list one more web service. So we'll say it's a page. I think it was 50,002 MSDW GL. And then there's this column here says just publish. So once you add it, all you have to do is just click published, and that's it. Again, this is all you have to do in terms of making this particular data set, all the data that we just saw there, to make it available to Excel. So this is done once. You don't have to do this every time you're trying to export the data. It's done once, and then anybody right now that has access to the OData web services can actually start working with it. So I will open Excel. Office 2013 has the option of reading OData web services. I think Office 2010 has too, but but I think only in Power Pivot. So I know for sure that in 2013 you do have that option as well as in Office 365. So you can say I want to get data from other sources. So as you can see, one of the options here is OData data feed. So now it will expect to give you the address of the web service. So if this is something that your partner or your IT or your super user will provide you with. You don't really have to know how they come to it, but basically it's just a predetermined name. I will put it in here. That's the path for the web service. And then basically it will show to me all the data sets that have been made available to the web. Obviously, I have a number of them. I will just select the one that we have here, MSDW, and just say finish. It will bring him back to a table. We could create a pivot table, but generally speaking, perhaps you would just want to bring the data into Excel. So as you can see, it has brought over all the GL entries from the system. I guess, let's see, how many do I have? 2108, so not much there. you want to take a look at the posting date, it will be interesting for the next exercise we'll do. So as you can see, I have data in my demo database in 2012, 2013, and 2014. This is, by the way, a feature of Office 2013. It recognizes that posting date is the posting date column is actually a date, and therefore it actually creates this grouping already. So if I open here, see it says December. If I open 2013, it actually gives you the months where it has data, as well as here. Also, in the date filters, as you can see here, it actually gives you date, I guess, applicable filters, this quarter, last quarter, and this year, last year, and so on. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, this is one of the small features, but a pretty nice feature that comes with 2013. So anyway, this is basically this is all the records from there. At this point, having them into Excel, I would expect people to be able to sort of start building data based on this. The cool part about this is because this is a sort of web service, you can actually go in here and say refresh, which in this case, it will go and just read all the data, and if there was any new data, it will actually bring it over. So I think it's a much more elegant way of extracting data. And as you can see here, this is what I was talking about. There's basically any other user right now, whether it has access to Navision or not, in terms of a regular client, basically they can have access to a controlled data set that you have set up for them, and only have access to those particular fields. However, I guess one of the features of the pages that I want to point out is that generally, obviously, when it comes to GL, then there may be issues with control or who has access to various data, or maybe you just want to control either for security or basically for report design purposes. So what you can do, for instance, is with pages, and I will just copy the code from here just to make it quick. You can add a little bit of code. And I've made 2 changes to illustrate my point here. So I've added 2 pieces of code. Don't worry about it. Again, same thing, your partner or your super user or internal developer if you have one. But I mean, this took me like 5 minutes. So again, same thing. Once you do it once, it's reusable. You can have your partner spend an hour or 2 on all the stuff that I've just done, and then the rest of it is just basically work on your side doing the reports. So the first one is what I've done with this export is to say filter only on the data that is within the current year. So I think it would probably be easier to see this if I, okay, 1 second. I need to do one more thing. So if we take a look at the screen now, when I run it, you see here that it will tell us to filter 01/1/14 to 12/31/14. Basically, what it does, it takes today's date and then applies to the GL entries that is providing under this page. It applies the year basically filter, so this way you have less data than, let's say, if you had 10 years, maybe you just want to run reports on just this particular year. So obviously, one way you can make use of this. I mean, actually, if I were to change my date now. If I were to change my date, so let's say if I just say I'm in January 2013, so that's my new date, 30, okay. Let's see, confirm that that's what it says. I'm in October, no. Okay, so change date. Change the date and time, so let's say we want to change this to January 2013, 23rd, okay. So it's January 23rd, 2013. If I were to run this, hopefully it will work. There you go. Now the filter is 01/1/13 to 12/31/13. So based on the date on the today's date, it will go and grab only those particular transactions. So what you could do is you could maybe create one page that is essentially all the records, and then give access to that to, I guess, more super user level, or basically that would be for all your reports that are sort of year-on-year comparison or something like this, and then you could create one that is by year only. So now if I were to go back in Excel, remember we have what we have here, 2014, 13, and 12. If we do refresh, and if we go down here, as you notice right now, basically by simply applying the filtering, we only get 2013 here. So, that's the other thing that I was saying. This is not simply like the way I showcased with the analysis view, something that gets exported and then it's data that then needs to be regenerated. This is a live connection to Navision, and therefore it allows you to sort of refresh the connection. And therefore, if you create a pivot table, any kind of report based on this without modifying the layout, then you can come in and refresh it and get a new data. I mean, right now we're in October, so obviously you could come back in November and refresh and get the rest of the entries. The other more, I guess possible use for this, what I have done is on the user setup, so I've set up my user here, it's Nicola. I've added a column. This is just a simple modification, but I mean, obviously it could be applied in many ways that you could think of. I applied a column called department code. So basically, I want to assign myself, me, Nicola, is let's say, belongs to production department. Edit list, and let's say I belong to the production department. So what happens here is what I've added here is that part of the code, again, as I said, 5-minute code. If I have a department code, then basically you should filter the GL entries by that particular department code. So therefore, you would only get what your department code is, the entries belonging to your department. So if I'm just run the page right now, as you can see on the filters, I have the 2013 date range, which we have talked about before, but then also automatically right now it puts in the production department code, and I only get those transactions. And sure enough, if I go back to Excel and I do refresh, as you can see, I only get the production entries. So I mean, I think I think this kind of might give you some ideas about how you could make use of this functionality in terms of getting the data into Excel, and then from there sort of applying your own transformation or using it for other purposes in terms of building some financial reports. There are other features that come along with your data. I'm simply going to mention this because just in itself, it can get very complicated, and I mean, there's, you can spend hours on just that topic. So not only everything that we've done right now, this filtering is actually built into the functionality, which is basically, this is what I'm saying. This is for control. This way you can control dynamically by the user. So by changing this user setup, for instance. And if a certain user belongs to admin instead of production, then they will get just those entries. So it allows you to create one single data set that dynamically basically gets the appropriate results by the user that requests it. But also you can control that's why OData is a very cool feature. You can control the filtering during the request phase. So for instance, I can go in here and say I want to get my data. What I will do is I will take the filter out for user setup just so we can get a little bit more data than regularly. So I'll take this out so I can get all the GL entries. All right. And say OK. And then what we can do is the OData, and again, this is, as I said, it's something that can be provided to you by your system admin. You can actually apply filters to a particular query. So basically, I can say I want to get from the GL entries only the entries where the GL account number is 67500. So let me change this appropriately. Okay, MSDW GL. So if I go here and I say I want to get my data from OData Web Services, and where it's only 67500, it will just give me that option. And when I bring it over in here, it will bring all the production, but as you can see, the day filter still applies, so it's only 2013, and it's only the GL account 67500 for sales. So, I can control, therefore I can control what I bring into a particular tab by simply controlling the filter that I apply to that particular address. I mean, I know there are a couple of things that look somewhat, I guess, daunting in terms of access, but, as I mentioned before, again, this is, the setups, even the code here, this is something that only needs to be done once in terms of implicit filters. As for this, I mean, if someone wants to know how can I get the data just for a particular GL, or maybe for a particular date, or maybe for I don't know, particular department or something, you can provide them with the sample. So basically, this is why I have built this text, because I can remember personally myself exactly the format, and then simply people can just reference back. I mean, I think it's pretty simple to train an end user to just say, look, if you want to get just this particular GL account, or if you want to get another GL account, just change this value. Just provide this. Don't worry about the rest of it, and just change this in there. Or simply, I mean, again, you can stick with the regular access and then just apply the filtering within Excel. Under the same concept I mentioned before, you have queries. So basically, queries allow you to set up data extraction from the vision, similar to the pages. As I mentioned, pages by themselves can be used and can be added to a menu. So the screen can be added to a menu within the vision. Queries are basically defining a data set. So if we take a look at the GL entry here that I've created for the next topic, which is Power Pivot. Query is basically a relatively simple construct. You define the table or the tables that you want to get data from, and then you define the fields that you want to get data from. There are other things that it can do. For instance, you can actually define here that they should total the transactions by particular fields. So that allows you to build some automatic reporting within a vision. But generally, I would expect that if you want to get the data out to Excel, you would want to get the lowest level detail, so therefore no grouping. And plus, I mean, this is just part of the training of the queries. So generally, I would expect people to just do this. Just leave it as no grouping, get all the data, all the columns, and all the records, and then apply their transformations, totaling, and everything else within Excel. I think looking at this, it's a pretty straightforward, and it's pretty much the same thing as what we have done into the pages. I guess a fair question would be to ask, why should we use queries versus pages? So the pages allow us to use some of this functionality. It allow us to write code. So it allows us to do a little bit more fancy filtering if we need this kind of internal stuff. So whereas the queries are limited, and you cannot write that much code. There's very basic concepts in terms of code. However, the queries have other advantages. So for instance, one of the problems that I guess we could identify with the page is that if I take a look here, I have the GL account number, but I don't really know what the name of that GL account is. So, yes, here in the vision, if I drop down, I can see it in here, and it says increases during the year, but I don't really know that. So in terms of building some reports, that could be limiting. So what you can do with the queries, it allows you to do just like in SQL. It allows you to sort of link tables together and sort of generate a data set that doesn't exist naturally in a vision. So for instance, I'll create one very quickly. So let's say we want to get from first the GL account table. So what we will do from the GL account, we'll do the number and the name. And I guess let's say whether it's an income or balance sheet. Okay, and then we will say, okay, for each of these, we want to get the GL entries for it. So we will take the entry number, we'll take the posting date, document type, document number, amount, global dimension 1, global dimension 2, and obviously you can keep going in terms of fields. Then you just have to say on the GL entry that that's linked with the GL account. It's similar to, if any of you has done a report design, it's similar to the same concept. And then we can just save this. So we'll say 50,009 MSTW GL account, let's say. Okay. So if we just want to take a look first, by the way, you can run queries. It will give you the first 1,000 records. So see, this is 1,000 records. So now, all of a sudden, if we look at this, we have the columns that we had within the page, but now we also have some of the information from the GL account table as well. So just like we did with the other one, we will go to the web services. We say we want to add another one. This time we add the query, and it's 50,009 MSTW my GL account, let's call it, and published. Okay. So now if we were to go into Excel and we create another tab, data, from OData web feeds, so let's take this one. Okay, and then we have GL account. And basically now we get all the columns into the system. So we get the number, we get the name, whether it's income or balance sheet, and then the other transactions that we already had in place. So, I mean, I think that's the idea. I mean, in terms of just simply getting data out to Excel, the queries here allow you to sort of create a more complex structure than otherwise you would be able to. Okay, I guess this is pretty much everything. I mean, there's a lot more that can be said about the query feature. There's more filtering options within the links. There's more options within here where you can actually set up. For instance, maybe you just want to get all the GL accounts that are actually posting accounts, so then you could define a filter here. So say I just want to get everything that is account type posting. So we just want to get the posting accounts. So just get the raw data in itself. If we can save it. Also, this is the cool stuff. You just make a change and it automatically updates the record. So as you can see now, we get only the transactions that are posting. I guess it just goes from there. Okay. I guess unless there's any questions, we'll move on to the last part. Power Pivot in itself, it's actually a very big topic just by itself. But I mean, I will try to showcase the end result. Okay.
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, Cristian.
Cool. Okay. So the last part here, and probably the coolest part, is it's reporting with Microsoft Power Pivot. So first of all, what is Microsoft Power Pivot? Power Pivot is basically the self-service BI option from Microsoft. It is part of the product. It's freely available with Office 10, Office 2013, and Office 365. It, for the most part, leverages familiar Excel features like pivot table, pivot chart, and Excel functions format. So it uses the same Excel functions that you're familiar with, as well as it introduces some new functions. There's a language that allows you to do more advanced features in terms of building the data together, called DAX, but the format is quite similar to what you normally see in Excel. The tool is available both as personal business intelligence by simply using Excel. Basically what happens is when you do Power Pivot, it actually takes the data, puts it into the spreadsheet, and then it sort of does the slicing and dicing on the fly in memory, or as a corporate BI. That is, it can be used with SharePoint and SQL Server. Or there is a new feature, that the new option that was released this year, which is Power BI for Office 365, that allows you to, I guess you can think of it as YouTube for spreadsheets. So basically you can set up online SharePoint sites where you can share various spreadsheets rather than emailing them around. And it also allows the ability of refreshing them automatically with something called Data Management Gateway, as well as Power BI offers a mobile BI option, so therefore you could see those things on mobile devices. And from what I know, they work on all of them, not just simply Windows devices. I will, given the time, I will basically go straight into the end result. I have built a spreadsheet, so we'll close this. So let's open up the spreadsheet. So now everything we've talked about so far, it's simply getting the data out of Navision and into Excel. And from there, the expectation is that you will do what you have always done, which is sort of take that data, the raw data, and move it around and sort of manipulate it as needed to get to the end result. Power Pivot is, as I mentioned, the self-service BI option, and therefore it offers you the tools of actually working with this data and manipulating it automatically, and sort of allowing you to do slicing and dicing without necessarily having to start from scratch. So in itself, Power Pivot is basically, as I said, it's part of Excel, and it comes from Microsoft. When you want to work with it, essentially you get a screen where you manage the data sets. That's the first step. Again, I've done, there are some webinars that I've done from msdynamicsworld.com that you can find, or probably you can always reach out to me if you need some quick sort of crash course on this. Generally, you read the data. So what I've done in this, I read from the vision the GL account table, the GL entries. Then I have an actual calendar to allow me to do data analysis. Departments, I've actually read also the budget entries and the budgets available in my demo data. Once you bring the data in, which is similar to what we've tried with Excel, so you can just read it, you're basically reading it from OData. You can go to a diagram view just to basically define the connections between the data in here. So you can, between the GL entry and the budget entry, there's connections. Again, this is part of the design work. It's done once, and after that, you can reuse it all the time. And then once this is done, you can take the data into a pivot table, and it allows you to do slicing and dicing. So if I take a look here, I get my data sets, and then, for instance, what I can do is I can say, okay, let me do an analysis. So if I look at my GL accounts, and then I want to bring over, say, what do I have? I have net change. I have defined a measure called net change. I have defined a measure called balance to date. And then also I have defined a measure called net change ADM. What ADM is basically, net change is, ADM is actually net change, but only for the department admin within the division.
Hey, Cristian, I think we lost your desktop.
Oh, it's not visible?
No.
All right, 1 second. Is it visible now?
Yes.
I took care of it. Okay. All right. So what I was saying was that basically here what we have is in Excel you have Power Pivot. When you click on Manage, I mean, I'm not sure what we lost, so I'll just repeat this quickly. When you click Manage, it actually takes you to the data set screen for the Power Pivot. So here are the data that I've read from the vision: the GL account information, the GL entries, the departments within a vision, the GL budget entries, and the GL budgets within a vision. They were read from the vision using OData web services. So you have OData data feed. So it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same way that you would do the way we did it with Excel before. Once all this is defined, you have to have one more step where you define the table relationship between these things, which is done once, and then from there you just take the data to a pivot table. So I'll just do it again. So if I go here, I can bring my GL account. I can bring some measures that I've already defined, like net change, balance to date, and net change ADM, which is net change simply for the department administration. So as you can see, again, it's a pivot table just like the other one. Because this is pivot tables, you can actually start doing a little bit of slicing and dicing. So for instance, what I can do is I can say, I also have another measure here for budget. So if I bring my budget amount here, for instance, I have within the sales accounts, I have actually budget. So these are all totals for the entire database. But what I can do is I can say add, for instance, this one to the report filter. So once I have done this, I can actually say I want to only see the budgets for my 2014 budget. So if I scroll down, as you can see, I have a certain number of values here that belong only to that particular budget. If I want to do an analysis, let's say by department, I can just add one of the new features in 2013 is something called a slicer. So I can add a slicer here. So for instance, I can say I want to see my data just for the administration department. I want to see my data for the production department. I want to see my data for the sales department. So simply clicking on any of these, it would actually apply the filter to all the values that we have in there. If I click like this, then it just takes all the filters. I can actually do using my calendar. I can say I want to see my data just as a slicer as well. Let's put it one next to each other. So I can do 2012, and these are the accounts 2012. Also, one of the interesting features of the slicers is that basically it actually grays out the lines that do not have values. So this way you can see which ones would have values and which one they won't. And this is done dynamically based on the settings on the other slicers. Okay, then I can say 2013. As you can see, in 2013, I have all the values for all the departments. 2014, a value for all the departments. 2015, I have some transactions as well, which is mainly balance to date. So I mean, this in itself, I think it's it's a pretty powerful feature. As I said, there is some work behind to build the measures, but once it's done, it allows you to do all this analysis on all the accounts within a vision. I think one of the features that I want to point out that is specifically needed when it comes to financial reports is the ability to sort of make formatted reports. I mean, everything we've just looked at right now in terms of Power Pivot obviously works with pivot tables, which is very good for analysis, ad hoc analysis, but obviously does not allow a lot of flexibility in terms of formatting. You cannot bold, you cannot add your own columns, you cannot sort of change the layout or change what things are being placed. So you can actually do that using a certain feature of pivot tables. So first of all, if we want to do all the chart of accounts, what happens here is you can see if I click 2012, there's a lot less lines than if I click 2013, because the pivot table automatically shows only the lines that have data within that particular filter, within that particular filter context. What we would like to do is, if we want to make a formatted report, is we would like to be able to see all the lines regardless of whether they have data or not. So if we right-click on the pivot table, there is an option here on display that says show items with no data on the row. So once we click that, as you can see now, it brings over all the GL accounts that we have in our chart of accounts, whether they have data or not. So it's obviously a much longer list. Once we have done that, what we can do is, as you can see here, we have the pivot table tools. And you can use under now Analyze, there is a feature called OLAP Tools, and you can say Convert to Formulas. Once you click that, don't click this one, just leave it alone and just say Convert. Okay, so what has happened is you can see the sort of pivot table construct interface, it's not there anymore. And actually, if we start clicking in each cell, we notice that each cell has actually a formula underneath. So basically what it has done, it has taken the pivot table and converted it into what is called cube functions. So basically each cell here is actually reading back from the Power Pivot data model and is independent of everything else. The good news is that the filters here still work. So basically if I click on administration, they get applied. If I click on production, it gets applied. If I click on my year, basically I get 2015, so it actually does that, okay? So from that perspective, the filters work here at the top. You still have the same functionality with the pivot tables. The good news is, though, that now what I can do is, for instance, I can actually go in here, and because they're all independent of each other, I can go in there and say, okay, you know, add a column, for instance, variance versus budget, I guess. That would be probably more easier illustrated where we have a budget. There you go. So I can actually say here variance, you know, I can add a formula here, and basically it does the difference between the two cells. So you can add your own stuff. Also, for instance, if for whatever reason my report called for some separation, you can actually insert lines. It doesn't matter, it would still work. So if I apply the filters 2013, it will still work. If for whatever reason I need to have a probably, you know, irregular format, I can move some of these cells, you know, I can just move them out of where they were before. Yet when I apply the filters, everything will work the same way. So as you can see, the numbers are getting changed as I apply the filters. So, you know, once you get into this kind of layout, basically it's easy to just build your own financial report. You can bold things. I mean, I can go in here and say bold and underline. You can apply basically formatting to the cells, and you can sort of do pretty much anything you want. The only thing that I would warn you, or the only drawback of this approach, is that once this is moved to cube formulas, obviously it doesn't have the feature that comes with pivot tables, which is you automatically add lines. So what happens is in a pivot table, if today I have only 5 GL accounts that have the transactions, it will show those 5. If tomorrow I have 6, it will automatically show 6 lines instead of 5. Here, it will show the lines in terms of GL accounts that were in the system, that were on the spreadsheet at the moment when we convert it to formula. So if after starting to do this report, now you need to add another GL account, basically at that point, that will not automatically be added. One, because you're not within the pivot table construct, but two, simply because once you start moving around these things, I mean, obviously it would be pretty tough for the system to figure out where it should be added unless you have some kind of reporting tool. So at that point, you would have to add, you would have to add the line, manually. But obviously with a little bit of attention paid, or otherwise go back to a pivot table, convert it to formulas, and then sort of redesign the report, which is not ideal. But if you look here, you can actually copy the formulas. It's not really that once you kind of sort of take a look at the formula, as you can see, it reads a value. So I mean, if you had a new one, all you have to do is just type in here and change the names. So you can actually add another line, and it's not necessarily that complicated. So if I just want to add another line, I can just copy and paste. It's a cube formula. I mean, obviously you can try to type from the beginning. So let's say I want to do something like, hopefully I'll get this right, 13350. I'm copying from the ones that I moved on the receivables. There you go. So I mean, basically now it's reading that particular element, and then you can do the same thing here. You can copy these two cells and put them here. and then change the filter, change the reference to which cells is actually looking at. So it's looking at balance at date, okay. And yeah, it's the same. As you can see, all of a sudden, by just copying this, you see it's the same values as here. If I do this, so if we do all the years, so 3129, 3129, 3129. So as you can see, it's not that complicated. Basically, because of the way these are referenced, you can actually add another line. Obviously, I didn't line that existed, but I mean, in your case, you would just add whatever the new name of the GL account that it was in place there. There was a little bit of work behind the scenes in terms of doing this data model, but I mean, as I mentioned before, this is a one-time deal. Once you do this and once you get the data, you can actually go and just say, just like with the other approach, you can just say refresh, it will read the data, and then it will update all the numbers. And then generally, once the data model is done, the recommendation is to create other pivot tables within the same spreadsheet. And this way, you sort of don't have to redesign the data model from scratch on every new spreadsheet. Okay. And with that, I guess we are done for now. I know it was a very fast-paced run through this. I guess, do you guys have any questions or comments? We can open it up officially to questions if there's still someone left on the webinar.
So we have one question here. You've shown 3 ways of getting data in from NAV. Is there one that you recommend to clients?
My recommendation is basically to do Power Pivot. I mean, I think it's the most powerful, and it's the one that allows the most flexibility and the most control. The issue obviously is that some people feel a bit scared at the beginning on figuring out that data model concept, which is really not that complicated. So, but I usually recommend Power Pivot. But I mean, other people probably just prefer getting the data. So just getting the data and then doing whatever they want within Excel. So I mean, obviously that would be the second recommended one, which would be the set up the OData web services and just sort of read it straight into Excel. But that's only in 2013 and up. So, but I'm a very big proponent of Power BI and Power Pivot. So definitely give it a try, and I think you will fall in love as soon as you give it a try.
All right, excellent. I don't see any more questions at this time. Oh, here's one. For Power Pivot, does it support multi-user in terms of multiple users having the same view?
When you open up the spreadsheet, I mean, for me, because I saved it, it sort of uses this, but actually at the time of logging in, it will ask for the login to the Vision. So basically different users can use the same spreadsheet. When they get in, it will actually ask them for the username and password. So there may be a default, just like it works sometimes when you go on a website and default to the original user that designed it, but different users will have to provide the password. So basically you can do one spreadsheet and everybody when they log in, they'll have to provide their own login. So obviously if you don't have permission to the data being read through your data, then you won't be able to run it, but if you do, then you will be able to get in.
And there's a question that came in. Can you just explain the difference between Power BI and Power Pivot?
Yes, that is a very long conversation, but I'll try to do it very quickly. So Power BI, I mean, it's a very confusing term because Microsoft means one thing by it, and whereas most people mean a different thing. So generally, a little bit of history. In 2010, in Office 2010, they came out with Power Pivot, which was the only thing available at the time, and it was just something that they were playing with. And you could and still can install it on 2010, but you had to install it separately and download it and everything else. Then in 2013, they added 3 other things called Power View, Power Map, and Power Query, which they all sort of overlay on top of Power Pivot, and I'm not going to get into what those things do right now because we don't have the time. But basically, most people, when they work with this, they refer to Power BI as those 4 things. As you may imagine, it's a mouthful to say Power Pivot, Power View, Power Map, and Power Query every time you try to say something about them. And sort of half joking, half serious, I've sometimes referred to these things as the 4 powers, just to use a different term. The Power BI, as Microsoft sort of refers to it, is really the extra granule that you buy on top of Office 365. So if you have Office 365 E3, then you go, I think that's the only one that you need to get, but you can buy standalone as well. Then you can buy Power BI. as Microsoft calls it, Power BI for Office 365. And that one, as I mentioned before, it's basically SharePoint Online, mobile BI, and data management gateway that allows you to automatically refresh your spreadsheets. So I always say, look, Power Pivot, if you can compare this with a cake, Power Pivot is it's basically the filling, is the layers of the cake, and it's basically 90% of the goodie bag that comes along with this stuff. Power View Map and Power Map and Power Query are, if you will, the icing on the cake, and then Power BI for Office 365 is the cherry, though considering all the features it gets, is more like the strawberry on top of the cake. So, I definitely recommend that if you have Office 365, you should go for Power BI and go and try all of it. But, I mean, I think the biggest problem with Microsoft making this confusion here is that really most people can spend years on just Power Pivot. So, I mean, don't just say, hey, we don't have Office 365, we can't, because reality is you can actually use Power Pivot starting with Office 2010, and you don't have to have all the other tools. Also, the other thing that I maybe should have mentioned, I forgot to mention another advantage of Power Pivot that I like versus everything else that we talked about. The data, as I mentioned before, it gets stored into the spreadsheet, which also means that, you basically can do the refresh and then give that spreadsheet to another user, and then they can manipulate it, whether they have access to the database, whether they are even on the internet or anything else, they can do all the slicing and dicing. So it travels very well from that perspective. Basically, you don't have to be online to be able to do that. Also, because if you do connect via OData web services, then you can also do this whenever you're on the road. I mean, there's two options, either VPN, but if your IT department is willing, these web services could be made available through the web. I mean, obviously, in that case, there are some considerations about security and everything else, but in theory, technically, it's possible. And I didn't really get through it simply because there was not enough time. But also Power Pivot works directly with SQL Server database. So you can get the data instead of using OData web services, you can get it from SQL, from the SQL backend of Navision. So therefore, if you are not on 2013, you can still do this as long as you're on SQL. It's just the access to the data and the way you define the data sets is not necessarily as friendly as it is with OData. Okay. Do you have any more questions, Jason?
All right, we're going to start wrapping up here. I don't see any other questions. Well, first, Christy, let me just say thanks to you for taking the time to present today to our audience. Really appreciate it, as always.
No problem, my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks to everyone in the audience for their attention, for the great questions. And we have recorded today's session. We'll be sharing that very soon. So with that, we're going to conclude today's session. Have a great day.
Thank you.